Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, December 21st, 2021 meeting of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Quickly, I think the elephant in the room, or in this case, the Potter and honeysucker in the room, wanted to address us about solid waste. So, Mr. Potter and Mr. Honeysucker, the floor is y'all's.
All right, thank you all so much. As part of our commitment to make sure that we are very transparent, we'd like to give an update each and every council meeting to the committees. So I just want to briefly update you on the transition of taking over the trash today. Our staff did a phenomenal job transitioning over with the routes. They have got out, they took over the 5 routes, and they were able to successfully complete the transition of taking over those routes today. I do not have an afternoon update on Red River, but hopefully I will have that for you before we leave out of this committee room today. Mr. Potter.
I just want to reassure the committee that our goal is to restore recycling as quickly as we can. We certainly hope that it will not extend through January, but we have to plan accordingly. But our goal is to get it restored as fast as we can. So we're going to stabilize trash pickup first.
What's the status on getting some emergency vendors in place to pick up?
There's two, is Amanda here? No. So there's 2 tracks presently going. We had a track that was ongoing to do the annexed part of the county that we were going to do. That contract is in the process of being awarded. And then we have secondary attempts to get emergency contracts in place, but we're having more difficulty with those because of availability of equipment and people. And then the storms in Kentucky have taken a lot of assets to Kentucky. But we're doing everything we can to get as many assets to bear as we can. And John is working as hard as he can with his crews to utilize our equipment and our people as much as we can. So we're going down both paths to get that done.
Councilman Cash?
Thanks. It's an unfortunate situation. I appreciate y'all being candid about everything that's going on. I know we're encouraging folks to take recycling to the recycling like drop-off centers. Are we? I mean, so I would assume that we're anticipating a much greater input into that. Are we adjusting in terms of like how frequently those bins are being picked up?
We are. John can brief that.
Yes, so currently we have, with this new process, have roll-offs working 3 shifts at the convenience centers and at the 10 convenience drop-off centers, They will be working pretty much 24 hours a day to make sure that we alleviate that. And in some cases, such as the Granbury drop-off that takes place this Saturday, we're going to extend the hours there and also put in additional containers there. You will receive notification of that. So we'll extend that to hopefully offset any extended volume during the Christmas day. Also with that, I have the contractors coming in to work on Sunday to go around to the late locations to try to knock that down, so we won't start the week off in a deficit.
That's important.
Anyone else? Councilwoman Evans?
After you're done, I guess, with all once everything is kind of back to whatever normal looks like for this, will you be able to measure the contaminants, I guess, and the drop-off bins that are at the recycling center, the drop-off locations? Because, like, I'm thinking of McGavock High School, it's always terrible where people are contaminating that particular drop-off. So will you be able to measure, like, how much of that actually went into the landfill versus what you were able to successfully recycle during this kind of window?
Yeah, that material is periodically audited, and so we can do an estimate. When there's sudden extra contamination, that's a little harder to determine, but we do pay the disposal cost for all of that material. So yeah, we're going to have a kind of a rough idea. We wouldn't have an exact idea.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And that goes back to my request last night about people being diligent about their recycling practices and not putting it in the trash, but trying to do the best they can with taking it to the recycling centers. If y'all could focus that in your communications to your constituency, that would be good.
Ms. Hurd?
So I I don't have a question as much as I have a comment, I guess. But these responsibilities used to be over public work, correct? Was it in public works prior?
Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
ma'am.
Yeah.
We-
And now water, so the people who were the experts in public works, are they now working in water, or are they working in transportation? Because here's my thing, is that if you all working in water are not familiar with how this process goes and don't know what needs to be done and how, and that's part of the problem that we have had historically, because this didn't just happen. We've been talking about this for 2 years. So now that it's in water, and we're gonna take on all of these, are we gonna be looking for an increase in fees in the next year or two? Because now water's taking on recycling and it's taking over the trash collection and all of that. I'm not sure. I've had constituents call me livid about the recycling and what's going on. I appreciate the updates that you're giving, but it seems a little cavalier about what we're going to do. I'm concerned about what have we done, how did we get to this point? Because if we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat it. So let's get to the bottom of the problem and fix that problem as we go forward. You know, if that means we got to get dump trucks and get some folks out there to help get this trash, get them somewhere and remove the trash from the taxpayers, because they are the ones that are the victims in this. They're paying their taxes, but yet they're the ones that's not getting what it is that they pay for. So are we going to be expecting an increase in fees come up, and is it going to be under stormwater, or water got to increase in order to take care of the cost that we're going to be having as a result of all of this going to Department of Water?
Their water and the waste are separate. So there won't be an increase in fees based off of stormwater rates or anything of that. It will not. That's not a thing.
Waste management is paid for out of the general fund.
And it's the same folks doing everything, it's just housed under Metro Water. As far as, I think there was concern of loss of expertise or anything, it's the same faces, it's just now under Metro Water and Mr. Potter.
I feel extraordinarily confident in our staff.
Anyone else? All right, thank you, gentlemen, we appreciate the emails, and
Will you be updating during the holidays, just like on a weekly
Yes, ma'am.
basis or something, please?
Sonia Allman will keep constant,
Awesome.
real-time updates on things.
Thank you.
all right. Moving on, we have a handful of items we can knock out on consent, and so I will read out the ones I'm recommending, and y'all let me know if you disagree and would like to pull it from consent. That would be RS 2021-1284, 2021-1292, 1293, BL 2021-1021, 1024, 1020. I'm sorry?
What reading is that?
Second. 1026, 1027, 1028, and 1029. Any of those do we wish to pull?
Was Councilmember Allen going to pull 1021?
I wasn't reading fast enough to see.
Oh,
Can
I
you start with the
apologize.
second reading with me?
Yes, I can. 1021, 1024, 1026, 1026, 27, 28, and 29.
All right, Councilmember, you can re-answer that.
You asked a question about 1021, so I wasn't sure if you intended to pull it.
I do not have a question on 1021.
Okay, I move the consent agenda.
Okay, well, let me read their,
Second.
That's it.
sorry. Let me read their captions really quickly, and we'll proceed to a vote. RS 2021-1284, Alan Withers and others accepts a hazard mitigation grant from the Tennessee Department of Military, Tennessee Emergency Management Agency, and the Metro Department of Water and Sewage Services, and authorizing the acquisition and demolition of 7 houses located in various floodways, floodplains in Davidson County. RS 2021-1292, Allen E. Young approves a contract between the Metro Government and Womble LLC for the provision of heavy equipment rentals and associated equipment rental services. 2021-1293, Bradford, Syracuse, and others amends RS 2021-1222 to correct the estimated completion date for the construction of a complete street on SR1 from I-24 ramp to Foothill Drive. BL 2021-1021 by Hall amends ordinance number BL 2021-693, which previously established a special solid waste and recycling commission to revise the participation role of staff from the solid waste division of the Metro Public Works Department or Metro Water Services. BL 2021-1024, Stiles, Allen, and others declares a certain planned road on the Orchard Bend Park property to be a public right-of-way and granting a temporary access easement. 2021-1026, Sledge, Withers, and Young authorizes PDP Acquisitions, LLC to install, construct, and maintain underground encroachments in the right-of-way located at alley number 806 at the intersection of Hagan Street. BL 2021-1027, O'Connell, Withers, and Young abandons existing water, sanitary sewer, and stormwater mains as sanitary sewer manholes, storm catch and basins, and easements to relocate a fire hydrant assembly and to accept new water and storm sewer mains, storm catch basins, water quality unit, and easements for 5 properties located on 7th Avenue South, 8th Avenue South, and Fog Street, also known as Paseo South Gulch. BL 2021-1028, Nash, Withers, and Young relocates a water pressure reducing valve to construct public water main and to acquire temporary and permanent easements through negotiation, condemnation, and acceptance for property located at 5646 Amelia Drive. And BL 2021-1029, Benedict, Withers, and Young replaces the sanitary sewer force main to construct a new sanitary sewer force main and to acquire temporary easements through negotiation, condemnation, and acceptance for the Clean Water Nashville OAP Howes Avenue force main replacement project for properties located along Howes Avenue, Rothwood Avenue, Geisen Drive, Idlewood Court, and Idlewood Place. All those in favor of the consent agenda say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We're still at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Just for clarification, that's 5646 Amelie Drive. There is an Amelia Drive too, we just wanted.
I sit corrected.
My first address when I moved here.
Oh, okay, a little Nash history.
Councilmember Henderson's here.
She's over here.
Oh, hey.
Yes.
Right in front of me. She's a snake, she bit me. All right, so that's 9 on consent.
There's a snake in my boot.
Okay, Woody. Back to the beginning of the agenda. RS 2021-1252 by Hall encourages recycling efforts in Metro and requesting the Metro Department of Water and Sewage Services incentivize recycling efforts.
So
Councilman
moved.
Hall.
Well, this is a perfect transition from our earlier guest. This is just simply in conjunction with creating that solid waste commission and the efforts that Stormwater are already taken. The goal is to find ways to study ways to find the ability to incentivize both individuals and businesses to do more recycling. We know we're facing a major uphill battle with trash and recycling, and the fact that we've got to come up with some additional places to do things. We've got to come up with some alternatives, and the goal of that commission and the thought process behind it was to take that 30-year solid waste plan from the Solid Waste Regional Board and try to condense it to 10. Because the criticism we've gotten repeatedly from that board is that Metro Council has not been aggressive in finding new ways to implement those things. And so that's the whole purpose of this. Again, just trying to come up with ways to see if we can incentivize both individuals and businesses to do a better job and get us moving forward towards sustainability.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess, Councilmember Hall, maybe, I understand the intent, and I knew when I saw this on the agenda last week, all right, you know, at that time, I was thinking, when are we going to transition into twice a month curbside? And now, today, I worry that this sends the wrong message, right? Incentivizing it just as we have suspended service would feel like maybe council is off a step from where reality is. And so I do have a concern. I wonder if maybe we should defer this until such time as we have been able to restore the basics of recycling.
And I wish those guys were still in, because that was one of the conversations I had with Mr. Honeysucker in the process of this, and why I had deferred it before but didn't actually change the language. Because the goal of this is to, of course, find the new contract, come up with additional recycling locations. So that's why there's no timetable associated with it, and it's fairly generic in the language to allow for them to be able, for the two things to be able to run together. Saying that we want to encourage them to incentivize it without a timetable gives them the ability to say, okay, now we've got these new contracts, now we've got these new vendors in place. Here's some suggestions on how we can get the general public and industry to play a bigger role.
I'll just say for my part, it's going to be hard for me to go back to my constituents who are upset today that they literally cannot recycle and say, hey guys, let's figure out how y'all can recycle, because the response is going to be, we can't, right? So, me personally, I would have a hard time supporting this today.
If you don't mind, I was going to go to Ms. Smith maybe, and from a staff point of view, as far as where is staff on this, or the idea of incentivizing and how that plays into the solid waste plan, or what your thoughts are?
We don't oppose the legislation. We just weren't super familiar with what the purpose was. But at the same time, we are in a difficult situation, but we do want residents to remember that there are some options and to focus on that. We would be fine if it moved forward or if it was deferred.
Well, if I may dovetail, Jim Snyder, Metro Water, Councilman Hall, if you're okay, if we could have a deferral on this, so we could at least sit down and talk maybe some of the details with you.
Sure, that's what I said. We've deferred it once before with that intent, so I'm not opposed to that. There just wasn't any feedback in that time period from the first time we deferred it, so I'm still open to that. Like I said, all our conversations had been centered around a generality so that it gave them the flexibility, because while constituents like mine who hadn't had recycling picked up in over 90 days, and it's just all over the place, while they're upset about recycling not being picked up, they're equally as excited and concerned about, okay, when it gets picked up, where is it going? Because we're used to the ones being the place where it all gets dumped. And that's their concern. But aside from that, yeah, there's no issue with that. Again, always open to suggestion. If there is a particular language or framework that you guys are more comfortable with, I'm more than open to that. But the goal is we have to advance this conversation rapidly. Even just in the last week, you've had multiple media reports brought back out about the looming disaster that we're facing. We have got to figure out what we're going to do with our trash and recycling, because Rutherford County is in the exact same scenario we're in. My C&D landfill is locked in Metro, with Metro in a lawsuit, and Rutherford County is now about to do the same thing. And both places are at capacity, regardless of what folks try to tell you. Anybody that's spent a lot of time dealing with this knows we're waiting to have a conversation now or kicking the can down the road about something that 3 years from now, when those places are both closed or at complete capacity, we have no alternatives whatsoever in place. And waiting until the last minute is not an option. So let's measure twice, cut once, but let's get the language right, figure out something, and move forward aggressively.
Councilwoman Allen?
Thank you. I appreciate the conversation, and I sort of feel like Councilmember O'Connell does, that this would be a more positive message if we are able to take some time to get the language right, and then issue it once we've gotten the recycling existing again, and then to talk about improvement. And so I would ask if staff can kind of suggest, when the most likely expected date for resuming recycling is, and target that as when we would bring this back, and then use that time in between to do any finessing of language that we've talked about here.
So our goal is to restart as quickly as possible. At this point, because we are, as our director said, we're working very hard and talking with all of the haulers. We have this emergency solicitation out. We have a lot of people who are interested, but we don't have any firm commitments, so it's difficult to predict. Part of the issue is that, as was said earlier, you have all these other cities that are having their own staffing and supply chain issues. So it's a little more complicated now than it probably would have been if this had happened, say, 3 years ago, before the pandemic.
Gotcha.
Could the sponsor define and incentivize what it is that you would expect or would like to see?
So, and so there's not confusion with the timelines, because we're talking more so about getting back on track with collecting recycling, as opposed to, they could start tomorrow, they could start next year. Either way, it doesn't make a difference. How are we going to encourage citizens and businesses to do more recycling? We have landfills that do 2% maybe of the recycling that they could do or are capable of doing. So it's not about getting it picked up. It's about what are we going to do as a metro government to get regular citizens to recycle more, to get businesses to recycle more, to get the companies we are working with to themselves to be able to do more recycling. So really the timelines don't have much of anything to do with one another. Like I said, you could start picking up tomorrow, or it could be a year from now. We still got to have the conversation of how do we get more pickup, how do we do more recycling, how do we start to make sure that, to Aaron's point earlier, how do we make sure that in those pickups we're separating better and we're relieving some of the contaminants so more items can be recycled. We're focused kind of on an arbitrary timeline and not what actually needs to be done, and that's why the Solid Waste Board has been so critical of us.
So you don't have any specific thing in mind in terms of an incentive?
No, it's to give them free rein because they know their system and their process, and they can look at what they've set aside with the contracts they're negotiating, all of that, and be able to say, here's a way that we can say, this we believe will get people to do more, this will alleviate some of the pickup problem and get the companies to do more. It gives them a blank slate to be able to work that within their system. That's why, again, the generic language and no timetable.
Councilmember Henderson?
For Ms. Smith and also for Councilman Hall, so year before last, this committee was established a solid waste and recycling subcommittee was the intent to do there. I respect and appreciate now we're going to have another commission or group. But I just want to understand, because I feel like we have a disconnect sometimes in what we're hearing from our citizens, right? We want to recycle more. We know we need to do that. We have the market dynamics. We have the pandemic pressure. And so I feel like, from a budgetary standpoint, we've funded the extra trucks to be able to do the whatever, the every other week. But now, just as far as, what is this body doing? Councilman O'Connell shared the resolution that Councilman Syracuse advanced, that we kind of looked at the history and we were trying to just kind of make a public statement particular to Red River. And, we're kind of in this moment of flux, and I apologize, colleagues, I wasn't here for the earlier discussion, but I just want to understand, Ms. Smith, from a staff perspective, from the administration's perspective, the Solid Waste Region Board, this now thing that has been established through Mr. Hall's legislation, I sometimes feel like we're just kind of cross purposes a little bit, and I just didn't know if you could speak to what is the recommending body from a policy perspective that says, ABC 1, 2, 3. To Councilman Hall's point, a lot of stuff in the plan. What are the priorities? What do we need to do next? How is that reflected in the budget? How is that reflected in any policy we pass here? Like, it's just still unclear to me what the various boards and commissions are doing, because if we're saying we're encouraging something, like, we all know that that's, there's some value in that, but it only gets you so far. So can you just speak to kind of organizationally how we're advancing any policy or budgetary stuff, like the different boards and commission? Like, what is the
So
flow chart?
The new commission that was created, you know, their role is to basically pull out and make recommendations to move forward. Separate from that, since we've been over at Metro Water Services, we've had a lot of support to move initiatives forward. We don't necessarily have a huge amount of funding for that at this time, but we're moving forward things that we can that are low cost. We've started the construction, demolition, recycling plans that people have to submit now. We are working on internal legislation and potentially future legislation around C&D that would tighten things up. The two areas that, in my opinion, are most critical for the plan are organics and construction demolition. Those are the two areas where we can make our biggest impact. And we're looking at potentially starting a pilot. I'm working to get a grant to do a pilot food waste collection. I mean, some of these things are theoretical because I'm applying for grants and things like that to do it, but from a department standpoint, I would like our recommendations on how we see support. Like right now, we have a lot of support on C&D. That's one thing I want to move forward because there's a lot of support around it. Food waste, we have a huge amount of support. A lot of people realize you shouldn't throw it in the ground. It's just going to create greenhouse gases. It's going to be, you know, contributor to, you know, to climate change. So I can't so much speak towards the Solid Waste Commission because since they haven't met yet and sort of established, but my understanding is that their role will be to say, let's pull out these and move forward with these first. The Solid Waste Board doesn't particularly have a role now. Their role per Tennessee Code is to come up with the plan and to report on the plan to TDEC annually, and then to approve or deny landfill. So they are a state mandated board with a very narrow purview. So they don't really, I mean, they could make a recommendation, but they have no authority to say, Metro, you should do X, Y, Z.
And so you can see that this commission's gonna make recommendations.
That's
to
the
this
fill-in.
body?
Absolutely, that's the fill-in. So, again, and just from a few months ago, at the head of that lawsuit and that battle at my C&D landfill, Southern Services and Waste Management, the premise was, the feedback from that board says, here's the plan that we've created. You've had it for a while. When are you going to start to implement or focus on specific things in that? So with them prioritizing things in the department like C&D, like household waste, that allows the commission to say, okay, here are recommendations from the plan. Let's take this piece. They've got something in place, so now we'll create legislation specifically around that. The next recommendation, and start pulling piece by piece out of that 30-year plan, because none of it, and one of the things that we got pushback on was that Metro had not taken it upon themselves to implement or officially make that solid waste plan part of Metro. And so that's what the commission will do. We'll literally take pieces of that plan, working with those departments, and turn that into specific legislation on each thing. And it'll go in steps as their capability and capacity builds.
So I'm going to interject. I think we might be veering off topic a little bit. So I guess when it comes to this resolution, do we have I think the sponsor indicated a willingness to defer. Is there a motion for any sort of deferral?
Yeah.
Defer to February 1.
February 1.
Second.
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 Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
That seems safe.
All right. We're up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right. Next, RS 2021-1263, Gamble Johnson Others appropriates $9,069,614 in ARP funds from Fund 30216 to General Services to expand the vehicle fleet of MNPD, NDOT, and the Sheriff's Office. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And before we get into it, I would remind this committee that our purview as Transportation Infrastructure Committee is of NDOT. So I would just remind us of that as we move into discussion of this. Councilmember Gamble, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair. This request came to the ARP committee this last time with the ARP. I would say we got a request from several of these organizations with the CARES Act funding several months ago or last year, but our ARP committee decided that we were going to focus all attention on the emergency response and our community response, our small business support, our rent and mortgage support and food support and other support for the community. So we did not take up or make any recommendations on any departmental needs with the first round of funding. This request is for vehicles, fleet, that is very much needed and has been needed, like I said, since we got the first request back with CARES, and the issue has exacerbated as the pandemic has gone on. This request is for fleet for MNPD, as well as DCSO and the Department of Transportation. And we feel that this is a huge need in the community to make sure that our response times for our constituents are efficient and timely, and that we have the necessary tools, or that these departments have the necessary tools and resources they need to do their jobs effectively. So the committee recommended support of this allocation, and ask for your support as well.
And how many vehicles for NDOT are part of this allocation?
4 or 5. Is it NDOT 10 and DCSO 4? Okay.
10 NDOT.
Okay. So 10 NDOT vehicles. All right, committee? Questions, comment? Councilman O'Connell?
I guess my question is for the administration. So we just had 2 capital spending plans in a single calendar year, the likes of which Metro has never seen. And this seems directly operational. My sense is that cities around the country are using CARES and ARP dollars to do things that either were extraordinary gaps that local funds couldn't support, or transformative projects that, again, it would be very difficult to fit into a standard year-over-year cycle. Help me understand the thinking around why this is more important to do with ARP one-time dollars than capital spending plan dollars.
Sure. The short answer is that in Metro, the capital spending plan can't be used for light fleet. It's for heavier equipment, generally speaking. And so the vehicles that you see under this proposal would not typically be what you'd see in an allocation for light fleet. That, in combination with the COVID-related needs of these departments, the police officers changing shifts where they can't have a clean car and are doing hot swaps, to the Biden suggestion that the funding can be allocated for crime reduction purposes because of the COVID crime spike relationship. This actually gets more officers on the street with respect to the 128 additional vehicles. This is an addition, not a replacement. And it's because of those 2 primary connections that we're advocating the use of the ARP funds in this instance.
Okay. I've got another question, but I'll let other folks go.
Oh, Councilwoman Henderson?
The DOT vehicles in particular are what? It came up previously that the MNPD vehicles are all SUVs, or, okay, and some are off a lot and some are prospectively a future order, but everything in the MNPD space is an SUV, correct?
Everything in the MMPD space is an SUV. They all will be ordered.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. But for DOT, what kind of vehicles are those?
So 5 of those are standard cab pickups and 5 of those are crew cab pickups.
Okay, and for what purpose on the road crews and so forth?
Well, I don't know if I'm the best one to talk about how they'll use them, other than their justification was that they could respond to multiple events while maintaining their current maintenance duties. And they could separate the crews down from a crew of, I think, 4 to 2 people in the cab.
So it's just in the road crew space?
Right, maintenance crews.
And then, Chair Young, if I may, how was the determination made to choose SUVs? Is that solely because that's what the Ford Motor Company is now promoting, or
Why were those chosen, and was there any critical thinking around choosing SUVs versus sedans when we know that SUVs are inherently more dangerous for people walking and biking?
I can take some of that, but do you want to?
Sure, yeah, so
Go ahead.
the SUV is the police interceptor package, that is what they make. The purchase will be, my understanding is when we make the purchases, we'll go for the hybrids, which actually get better gas mileage than the prior police interceptor sedan, which they don't make anymore. Plus the space that we need within the vehicle. We have in-car camera equipment, which if you ever look in the back, it's a pretty substantial amount of equipment that we have to store in there, plus all the equipment that officers carry, civil disturbance gear, active shooter gear, water rescue gear. I mean, they carry a ton of equipment, and so that allows us to carry all that equipment as well.
So they do not make the sedans anymore?
They do not make the sedans anymore for that.
Ford doesn't make cars anymore.
Correct.
I can add a couple of things related to safety that might be helpful. Just to say that these are pursuit-rated vehicles and they're certified and such. Also, they have been tested by the Michigan State Police, which is the leader in safety testing for pursuit vehicles since the 1950s. Also, and this is information from Ford, but 70% of police departments in the country are using these vehicles. We know that New York is, LA, Chicago, Atlanta, Tennessee Highway Patrols, and many other cities and states are using these intercepted SUVs.
Right. No, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, that's good information.
Councilwoman Evans?
I just had a question for the administration on the, to help me understand Councilman O'Connell's question about the CSP. Is that, why doesn't it qualify? I mean, is that like a charter thing, or is that something else? About fleets and light fleet versus heavy and that kind of thing?
We're just, the capital spending plan is oriented towards the larger capital projects, and then anything that comes under, these light vehicles are considered lighter equipment and categorized in the same outing as heavy copy machines. It's just been the way that finance has categorized that, and we've done the capital spending plan historically.
So similarly, and I guess.
Councilman O'Connell.
Thank you. It's a natural dovetail because it follows up. I mean, I guess I understand the guidance on this, but again, I mean, we are also here in the aftermath of the biggest metro tax increase in history, and I'm still looking at it and saying if we knew this was an MMPD priority, why have we not structured it into metro spending as opposed to looking at one-time spending, and are we setting ourselves up for future, where we have depreciation of assets that we can no longer afford?
Yeah, I think the real guidance, and I don't want to steal from Officer Gilder, but the real sea change came from the Biden administration memo in July that sort of was indicating for ARP allocations, there was a clear crime correlation. Then in consultations with the MNPD, they were clearly morphing towards the shift change, and I want to emphasize that is occurring irrespective of any fleet allocations, but going to the 4 10.5-hour days, the need for vehicles was all the more acute. We have not ordered new vehicles for the police department in going on 3 years. And we're trying to add staff, and we're already shortchanged for the vehicles for the police. We have provided replacement vehicles, about 175, but no new vehicles in that period for a fleet that undergoes some pretty heavy and intensive uses on a day-to-day basis. So each one of these is fairly significantly needed, but in the advent of the shift changes and the COVID-related inability to make an immediate shift change because the vehicle has to be wiped down and cleaned per specifications of the DOT and MNPD regs, that made this a bit more of an acute need than would ordinarily happen in any other given year.
I guess what I'm saying, maybe this is what I'm hearing, is this would not have qualified for capital spending plan because of the nature of the vehicles. And are you saying that the shift change was not known for FY23, basically?
The shift change in the context of I can no longer, and setting aside COVID, I could just pick up the next officer's car immediately after he completed or she completed his shift. That's not the case anymore. That's not the case this year, and was not the case by virtue of the guidance from the Biden administration. A year ago, that wasn't the case, and hopefully next year that won't be the case, but that's the hope.
So here in Transportation Infrastructure Committee, our purview is NDOT, and I'll once again remind us of that. And so is there any other discussion or questions regarding NDOT? We'll have those, or then we can go on to a vote. Councilman Nash.
I think this kind of covers all of them, but as the point was made, we just had a tax increase. But prior to that, we've gone a long time. And every single one of the departments on this list, one of the last things that was in the budget, or that they got to buy, was vehicles. And I can tell you the cars were long miles, high miles, and this is kind of catch-up to some degree. And I think we're blessed the fact that we've got these funds to do this. And so I would, for NDOT, they need the vehicles, and the rest of them do too.
Councilmember Hancock.
Thank you, Chair, for recognizing me. Chair Blitzen, should I say? I really like that sweater. So I also had that question when I was approached by the commander of the Madison precinct to talk about this, about how this qualifies as the American Rescue Plan. And so I did some research to look and see. And what I read was that the American Rescue Plan includes support for communities that are struggling in the wake of COVID-19 to distribute more than $360 billion in emergency funding for state, local, and other governments to ensure that they're in a position to keep frontline public workers on the job, paid, and maintaining other vital services. And state and local employment has fallen by 1.4 million nationwide compared to around 750,000 during the Great Recession. So I see this as an opportunity for us to show these valuable public servants that we do value them, while simultaneously budgeting for fleet maintenance and replacement moving forward. But being able to make this effort right now with not as much of a heavy lift because these the ARP funds are available, I think that it's just an ideal time to invest in our public servants. Thank you for letting me speak.
We have a motion to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, and we're at 11 still. Going down to 10. All right. RS 2021-1282 by Allen determines a plan for expenditure of a direct appropriation grant from the state of Tennessee in the amount of $5 million. Council Member Allen, tell us all about it.
Well, this is direct appropriation from the state government and specific stuff. How many numbers on the Sherman grant?
2021-1282, ma'am. It is a resolution.
I need to. So direct appropriation grant as opposed to other ways that you're getting funding, and most of it is about cleanup stuff, which we need desperately from all this crazy weather that we've had. So debris cleanup, riparian cleanup, EAB, Emerald Ash Board, waste operations, and garbage trucks, and home valve. So I think that's all important stuff, and
excellent.
I would ask for your approval.
We had a motion and second. And Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Young. Councilor Allen, can you just share how this kind of coordinates with, I know staff is going to be back to us February 1st, I believe, with a request led by Chair Nash, or former Chair Nash and Chair Young about kind of coordinating with TDOT around litter, roadside, right-of-way, maintenance, all that kind of stuff. Like, is this pass-through? Is this a special grant? Like, where does this fit kind of in the scheme of things? I mean, this obviously $5 million from the state, thanks so much. But I apologize, I failed to read the backup on this. Is this just sort of a one-time special thing in the context of COVID? Okay.
It is one-time special thing. I can't say for sure that it's just COVID related, but I believe it is.
Okay, but it's just coming out of the state budget responsive to cities, and so they're doing this for other cities as well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, or Councilman Swope?
If I may, in partial response to what you're asking about, Council Lady, I do believe, don't quote me on this, but I do believe this is specifically involving the massive weather events that have occurred over the last 2 to 3 months. rather than COVID. I don't think it has anything to do with
Appreciate
it.
it.
It has all to do with weather-related issues.
Particularly like acute weather,
Yeah, tornadoes.
flood responsive. Okay.
Tornadoes, floods, that kind of thing.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you for the clarification.
All right.
Mr. Chair.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? It is approved 10-0 now, I believe. That takes.
Chair, Health and I don't have a quorum, I'm on that committee. May I ask to move up 1010?
If you say please, Councilman Weber.
Please, Mr. Christmas.
All right.
That would be Mr. Blitzen.
All right. BL 2020.
Mr. Christmas.
BL, it might cost you a vote or two.
Okay.
Let's see. BL 2021-1010 by Glover amends the Metro Code of Laws relative to operation of entertainment transportation vehicles.
So moved.
Councilman Glover, tell us all about it.
Just very quickly, all this really does is said, you're not going to take any party vehicles within 600 feet of schools. All right, originally born out of Hume Fogg, and then we expanded it to any schools. It pretty much so lets TLC lay out all the routes outside of that, and then I think Councilman O'Connell, it's got a complimentary statement in here that if people are drinking without permits, et cetera, then the operator gets fined, as opposed to just the individuals, because they're coming from out of town.
I know Ms. Zeitlin just stepped out. My reading of the substitute was considerably different from that, and I read it as not complimentary to the other nearby work that's going on. I have no problem with the distance requirement, but I would need some clarification on the way that the.
Well, I believe we can amend on third, can we not?
We cannot.
I mean, with the suspension of the rules, you can just about anything.
Okay. Well, let's ask, because it was my understanding it was complimentary, and so, I mean, I'm not going to tell you because that I've memorized yours. I would ask that we approve it. If I need to defer, I will tonight in order to get it cleaned up.
All right, I think seeing if Ms. Zeitlin's around the corner.
While we're waiting, any input from Mr. Fields?
You know, the issue of being around schools is certainly, we have no issue with that, as well as reinforcing the fact that the commission has the authority the commission or its staff have the authority to establish routes and zones. So from that standpoint, we would not have an issue with any of that.
Ms. Zeitlin, I think.
Yeah, what was the question?
The question is on the substitute. I initially read it as potentially conflicting with the BYO permit we're attempting to establish nearby. The section 2.
We're on 1010, correct?
Yes.
So they're amending different provisions. So his is amending Title 6.
Right.
Yours is amending Title 7 in the beer permit, in the beer section, the open container provision. So they're complementary language, but they're being put into different sections.
I guess my
They
question
mirror
would
each
be, so that was my question, is I read section D as effectively prohibiting activity we are actually allowing with the changes we're making nearby.
So which provision is provision B?
Here we're adding a new subsection D, right, in 677240, in the substitute. And it says, it is unlawful for any person driving or in any way operating an unenclosed entertainment transportation vehicle to knowingly allow a passenger to consume alcoholic beverages or beer during operation of an unenclosed vehicle. So basically it's saying no open containers on unenclosed vehicles.
Does that include pedal taverns and carriages?
That would, I mean.
I don't have that language in front of me, so it's hard for me to.
This is on the substitute that's in the packet.
In this packet?
Yes.
For
1010.
for 1010?
Yeah.
A substitute in this packet for 1010?
That's what I've got.
I think that it's already substituted.
It is.
Yeah.
So, I was gonna say, there was a substitute added last time, okay. Unenclosed, it applies only to unenclosed entertainment transportation vehicles.
Right. So I guess what I'm saying though is, And I guess maybe I'd ask Councilmember Allen, I think there was some interest in the definition of enclosed versus unenclosed. My personal concern here is that if we add further restrictions to unenclosed vehicles, we are going to find that it is very difficult to get the state to cooperate on cementing our regulatory authority. I'm going to have a hard time supporting the substitute as it's currently written.
Mr. Chairman?
Or Ms. Seiler, were you wanting to?
I was just gonna note that the substitute is on the bill. That was added on first reading. So the substitute is the bill now.
Yeah.
There's no separate vote that needs to be taken.
Right. Mr. Nash.
Can we defer this and still have it up? It hasn't reached that magic number of deferrals?
No.
Mind if I defer?
No, because I mean,
Make sure you work it out.
the only thing that the most important thing to me is the school aspect of it.
I can support that.
Yeah, and so and not to sound rude, but I was assuming based on conversations we had that it was complimentary language. So if it's not, then I'm okay with sitting down and cleaning it up. So no, not at all. I don't mind deferring one meeting.
Motion to defer one meeting?
All those in favor?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have anything else?
Oh, yes. Yes, we now are back.
I was bored. Yes, we do.
Yes, but before we go to that, I am going to go out of order. One thing real quick, that'll be very quick.
They need me over there,
Yeah,
though.
we need all of us.
Okay.
We need you here.
And mine's gonna be really quick, because I'm deferring to the second meeting in January.
Okay, perfect. All right. BL 2021-961 by Johnson and others.
Move to defer.
To the second meeting in January.
In January.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Done. Next page.
And then Chair, for the public's education, that's the LPR.
That is the LPR bill. And, well, there's one last item. Wait.
You're still here?
We got a quorum.
Okay, BL 2021-1025, Van Reese, Withers, and others. Renames the Woodward Street between Galton Pike and Peggy Street and Linda Lang intersection, J. McMurray Way. The request by the sponsor to defer until February 1st.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Also, just so you know, in the future, this committee will be meeting in council chambers.
Thank you.
That was quick work.
We've out of this room.
So, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.